First of all, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me and Stu to come talk to you. Stu and I have given training sessions on how to do NBEMS before. It's a canned presentation with a guarantee that if you do everything we tell you, NBEMS will work, and then you can join our NBEMS net. My understanding is we want a slightly different perspective this time around, and the focus I was asked to do is why are we doing NBEMS? So I'm giving you a variation of the presentation which was given to the local RACES team, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency team, to get NBEMS added to our monthly nets. So this is why do we do it, and then we will finish off with a demo. So here's what we're going to discuss, the introduction, doing that now, why we do it, some stuff about it technically, and then Stu and I will actually use NBEMS, and you'll see some of the key functionalities that make it attractive. So what is it? It's a narrowband emergency messaging service. It's basically fldigi software, and the two get used more or less interchangeably. fldigi is the software, NBEMS is how we use it, I guess is the way to describe it. Public domain software, download it from the link in the group. There are three critical components that you need. You need fldigi, that's the software that actually does the communication. You need FLMessage, which is a form-based messaging composer. And FLAMP is good to have. It's a file transfer. It does checksums on the blocks, and you can then retransfer blocks that were lost in transmission. Most of the work we've done has been focused on FLMessage, and that's what we're going to demo. It is useful, not required, but useful to have rig control. I have an IC7000. The ham live that comes with fldigi seems to do just fine. Go ahead. Question? Yeah. Ham live rig control. It's got 272 digital modes, but 3 of them are used in our area significantly. One is Thor 22. That's the typical mode that we use for running the nets. Its notable feature is it has forward error control. So you can have errors in transmission and it will automatically correct them. Forward error correction, excuse me. That has an interesting little behavior that squelch becomes interesting, and I'll talk about that later. MFS32 is often used to move forms-based messages. And when the noise level is very high, we have used Olivia 8500 successfully to punch through some really bad noise. But what it is this set of software packages that allow us to do certain types of communication, which we were otherwise having trouble with. And I think this thing, yes. Let me compare to WinLink, because that's the other thing that comes up. NBEMS is broadcast mode. WinLink is directed traffic. You send it to a person. NBEMS is, if you're listening, you get it. NBEMS is purely RF. WinLink is actually an RF last mile to connect to internet email. The big one that keeps causing trouble is NBEMS uses name value pairs to encode the structured messages, and WinLink uses XML. So I can't take a form from NBEMS and use it in WinLink. You need to remember that because it sort of provides this, ooh, there's a hard line between the two. Example screen. I'll come back to this more. Why? That's what's most important here. We've been having HF nets as part of the MEMA drills monthly as far back as anyone can remember. When I first came here in 2012, we were having. You want to do NBEMS, I got to have additional equipment. Not everybody has NBEMS. So why add to the complexity? That was actually the question that got asked when this got brought up. And here's why. This is vocap. We're doing a prediction of the transmission quality around my home station, actually. And we're looking at SSP at 100 watts, and you can see the reliability is less than 90% up here, right up there. And it's a relatively small area. In fact, when we run the 80-meter SSP nets in eastern Massachusetts, or Massachusetts, frequently only half the stations can hear the other half on the nets. So we're having trouble with coverage. If you go to, this is for FT8, but it turns out it's very close to the the NBEMS modes. If you go to digital, we got a very reliable net locally, and it covers the region. There are weekly nets in our area from New Hampshire and Pennsylvania, and those communications are almost always 100% copy. They're very reliable. So going and adding the digital improves the reliability and also the range which the net can be effective. That was the big kicker when I went to Mike Ledger that swayed him over. And the other thing you can do is send complex forms, in this case, an ICS 213 form, which is the one my EMA office says. And you can do those, right? That's the one I get beaten up on. And it can do a whole set of forms. We'll take a look at it, but the one we use a lot is an IS 213. So questions on the coverage. That was the real kicker of why we went this route, is to get this reliability of coverage. Any questions here? And then, of course, we can provide forms that approximate what our served agencies expect. And so we always, in our monthly trills, include an ICS. Well, we include a form. Sometimes it's an ICS form, sometimes it's one of the other ones, but we always have the operators testing their ability to send and receive forms. What does it take to do it? It takes a PC, a sound interface, and a transceiver. I lied. It really helps to have rig control, but it's not required. The only control required is push to talk. It is really nice if you have the rest of the control as well. My rig at home, the one I'm using right now, has down here a PC, signal link, and an IC7000. That's what I use. And that's because the IC7000 has a really nice 6-pin mini DIN, the 6-pin mini DIN standard. And if you use this flow, this connection, it basically works. There are a couple of things you can do that can screw it up. I spent 3 weeks with my systems not working, and I'll explain what I did wrong and how to avoid that problem. But this is relatively foolproof if you use this. There are a variety of other systems that can work. If you've got an SDR, you can go USB directly into the SDR. What was it? 7600, I think, was one. The IC705. It's also possible to do it that way for an IC7100. You can see I know the EmComm rig's best. But if you set up this is a traditional system that'll work on almost any rig. And here's what the screen looks like when we're sending center frequency, or actually dial frequency. If you look at the signal, I always set it up with a lead tone for about 3 seconds. And I do that for 2 reasons. Reason one is if I'm going through a repeater, we need to make sure the repeater is keyed up. But the second is one of the big challenges with NBEMS is you don't hear the other person the way you're used to with voice. And if you double, you basically kill the entire signal. That little tone gives the other person a chance to realize, oh, someone's sending and I just doubled on them, and they can stop the transmission, hopefully before they double enough that the signal's not readable. I also have show the TXID. Not everyone uses this, but if you use TXID and RXID, no one has to guess what the mode is. The radios tell each other the mode. And then it's followed by the traffic data itself. The thing, we're not doing rapid turnaround with NBEMS. It's slow turnaround. So with the other digital modes, you have to have the turnaround as fast as you can. On NBEMS, you actually want it to stay transmitting longer. And if you're using a Vox or a Vox synthesized push to talk, you want a long delay so that it doesn't cut in and out during this early part of the message. Okay. So that's technically what it is. Any questions on technically what the signal looks like? Move on. On the rig, turn off all noise settings. This is what took me 3 weeks to get right. Many of these modes have subcarrier, audible subcarriers. So it's an audio signal, sometimes several of them, that are carrying data. Particularly if you have an automatic notch filter on, it looks at those and it says, those carriers are noise, and it kills them all. It took me 3 weeks to find a paper, finally explained this. I went off, fixed it. You don't need any of the noise conditioning in the transceiver. All of the handling and noise is handled by software. You also want your automatic gain control on, and you want it fast. Why? At least in 80 meters, which is where I've done most of the work, particularly for signals coming from Pennsylvania, I get fading. If the audio level drops too low, it won't decode. If you have AGC on fast, it will push the audio level up and keep it approximately constant. So you've got a better chance of decoding. Your signal of noise ratio obviously degrades, but the signal is still usable. So that's important. These are critical to make it work smoothly. The other one that frequency gets screwed up is people use upper sideband. Well, this uses upper sideband, but people will use lower sideband, and then the net is truly amusing. Notice that for the nets, we always turn on RXID and TXID. TXID means that I transmit a little header that says what mode I'm using. RXID says I'm listening to that, and if I hear a mode, I'll change to that mode. AFC, which is a tracking, if it sees a signal drift, it tracks it. You want it off because otherwise the noise will cause your center frequency in the audio to move. You want SQL off. The software does SQL just fine. You don't need hardware. We typically use a center frequency of 1500 because that's the center of the passband, and you'll see that in a bit. So those are setups. You also do disable frequency change because otherwise, if you hear a signal way up on the audio channel, you'll switch up there and break up the net. So those are things we find we have to do to make the net. Do this set of stuff, and it works. So let's go try it. I'm going to spend most of the time trying it. We're going faster than I was expecting, but that's okay. We can then spend more time on questions and answers and tests.
All right, so I have a 213 queued up for you, Don, and I can send anytime you're ready.
All right, so what I'm going to do is pull up fldigi. This is the main program. When you start up, I also start FLAMP and FL message. Now, technically, the system will auto start these programs if required. Don't try that at home. It fails too often to be useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a message to Stu asking him to send a ICS 213 message. You can see the waterfall here. Here's where I'm transmitting. We can also watch signals above and below us. You can have a lot of signals in this 3 kilohertz space as long as you don't tread over each other for this passband. You're good. So now Stu is sending me. He's sending me the standby. Perfect. That's what you would typically do in a net, is tell people to stand by. You can now see the start of the encoding here. It's basically name value pairs is what you're seeing here after the headers.
Could have done this in a faster mode.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's useful to get a sense of the speed at which it travels, because if you make it faster, typically it's less reliable. This seems to be the sweet spot. So he sent it. And I can view it in the forms editor. I can also view it as an HTML file, but I'm not going to, in a web browser, but I'm not going to do that. I like doing it this way. So this is a pretty much canonical ICS 213 form. I'm going to switch this so that I'm consistent with you. This is the mode we're going to use, and I'm going to use Thor 22. Now the question is, can I respond? The answer is yes. Double click there, it'll fill in the date. Double click there, it fills in the local time. Save it, is what I always do. And then you hit auto send. It will send it. And you see the tone signal starting it off, then the TXID, and now the message. And now you see very much like Stu sent. It's the same basic structure. You'll actually see Stu's entire message and then my message. It seems slow. Mike Ledger was concerned that the speed of the nets was actually too slow to be useful. The reality is we can handle messages for a group of, say, 10 on nets in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Our typical test net, monthly test net, is about 15 minutes long. each message is longer than it would be if I spoke it, unless I count the fills that I have to do for everyone to get it right. So Mike Ledger, who's the communications person for MEMA in our area, now has this as part of our standard net each month. And we have 6 to 10 people typically participating in those nets and sending and receiving typically ICS 213 forms for that on a monthly basis.
I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead.
How far out do you get? Are you limited to distance on this because it's digital, or can you, let's say, like talk to Sacramento, Washington, DC, Seattle, Anchorage?
All right. So on 80 meters, we can easily talk to Western Pennsylvania from Boston. That's pretty reliable. Did you get the response message there, Stu?
I did.
Is it worth showing them that you got it? Or
Well, I see it on my on the main menu or on the main screen. I'm looking for it in
yeah,
the
fine. We won't.
form, which I don't seem to see it in, oddly enough.
Yeah, you should have a little window, much like I saw up here.
Yeah, no, I've got it here. I'm actually looking at an HTML rendition of it, and I see it just fine.
Okay.
Yep.
You want to show it or not?
Well, probably not, because
Okay.
you'll have to unshare and I'll have to share, and it's probably just not worth the effort.
All right. So I'll go address the question of distance. We use 80 meters, and that will get us to Western Pennsylvania and literally up into Maine. So it covers most of New England quite nicely on 80 meters. This thing will go farther, more reliably than voice will. People are using NBEMS on certainly all the HF bands. There's work on 20 meters, for example, that I'm aware of. And so it'll go as far as your radios will go, and it will still get through even when your voice communication won't. That was the whole point of the exercise, and that's the circles for the reliable transmission that I showed at the beginning. So what you've seen is we can reliably transmit for all of New England complex forms that are suitable for use by our served agencies without changes. And we can do so with a system which realistically, the key component you need is that sound interface, where if you don't know what else to do, go get a signal link. If you have a preference, fine. But if you're not sure what to do, just get a signal link and set it up exactly as expected, and things will work. So it's $125 order magnitude beyond your basic rig and a PC. And I have this exact rig set up to be in a pack with my FT817 so that it'll work at incident command centers or in the field. And it works just like it's working here at home. It's the same equipment, just runs. So
I'll also mention that if you have a rig with an internal sound card, as I do, I have a 7610 I'm using, you do not need the signal link in that case. Yep.
In fact, if you do that, it becomes really simple. Just plug the PC in and configure it. That's how Phil does his, Phil KB1CYO does his 7100 is the same way.
Yeah. And the other thing might, I think you mentioned it briefly, Don, that the FL AMP component of the suite is well suited for sending files. So if you have a large spreadsheet or other kind of data file that needs to get to, you know, an EOC or a shelter or wherever, it's a very handy way to get those files transmitted quickly and error-free.
And as noted, yes, there's error checking on it. If blocks fail, you can request the retransmit until you get a complete copy. So it provides a guarantee of a complete complex file for the communication. Got to be careful here. We're talking about speeds that are of the order of, well, this is more like a 300 baud modem, maybe a little faster than that, but not a lot. So don't get crazy and send a 5 megabit picture through this. It will take a very long time. In fact, we actually, for our EMA group, we put together a procedure which reduces the size of the picture before we send them through any of the digital modes so that we don't jam up the traffic. And that's a whole separate exercise, which I can discuss at some time if someone's interested, but is not germane to directly doing NBEMS.
Don, there are a lot of questions coming through in the chat. Do you want to kind of?
Yeah, I'm about to go through them now.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know about that. Yep, it'll work on all operating systems pretty much. It's really a Java program, if I remember right. So anything that runs Java, it works. Little flaky on Mac OS. It's running nicely on Linux and nicely on Windows. I do Windows. Yep. At MEMA's Massachusetts EMA. Can this do CMS? Okay. No, it does not do CSMA. The only one of these digital modes that I've seen that actually handles the collision and multiple access of the channel is WinLink Packet. And that does it. The other WinLink modes don't. They have channel detection. They really can't share the channel. And even if they detect the channels in use, they don't always respond appropriately. That means you need to run it as a net. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But yes, it does not support collisions. And let's see, does it normalize time for logs? Yes, you can do everything in Zulu. I typically set mine up for local, but it can be set up completely to run in UTC as your thing, and you never see any local. I'm not sure what this coffee tastes like tobacco juice means. Yes, can you print the forms received? Yes, let's see if I can do that. Oh, you would ask that little question. I was carefully trying to do it. Okay. Hold on.
I think if you go down to view, you can view it as an HTML and print the page out. That's how I'll usually do it.
Yeah, I've lost mine. There it is. And how do you get the HTML to view this?
If you go into the main file
Yeah.
screen,
Yeah.
and on FL message,
Yep.
and go to file,
Yeah.
and get the drop down, go to view and HTML.
There we go.
Yeah.
HTML for delivery. There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then you can
There's
just
your
print that out.
HTML file. Go print it out. Go save it and send it via regular email. Yeah, it looks just like. Yep, Saturday morning. So there's a Northwest NWNM. What is that?
I think that's just a net that he's
Yeah.
advertising there every Saturday morning.
I think it's Northwest New Mexico.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and we regularly used to do training through repeaters. I don't recommend that for normal traffic work though, because repeaters typically have a timeout, and often the transmissions are longer than the timeout on the repeaters. and that can cause trouble. So you don't find it flaky on a Mac? Excellent. I've seen some reports elsewhere. But if it works for you, go for it. It's designed to work on all systems. Broadcast versus a directive. For a forms message, no. I'm not sure I have a use case where a structured form needs to go to everybody. We can watch our NBEMS nets that we do monthly. And one of the things that becomes quickly apparent is that you can essentially behave like a voice net in NBEMS. But I'm going to tell you what the limitations are that you have to be careful of. So if I were using NBEMS to support tactical communication, then its broadcast mode is a great mode. And we've seen that in use in our tests, and also set exercises. I don't think the forms are as good for that. And there's a presentation on WinLink, which I can give, which discusses forms in WinLink. I think WinLink is really good for forms. NBEMS is a way to do digital work, which will include forms, but it also allows you to handle this broadcast net type communication that's really good for tactical nets. Did that answer the question?
I think Barry had a good answer also as an example of a wide area weather alert that wanted to get out to a lot of people at once.
Why not check SQL to get rid of noise characters on the screen? And the answer to that is, if you do that, it takes a bit for the SQL to turn on, and you frequently lose the first few characters of the message. And so a number of us had SQL on for the screen to keep it nice and clean and only get the messages. And then we kept losing the first few characters of the message, and we turned it off.
Yeah, or if there's QSB and the signal is going up and down, the squelch can sort of kick in sometimes, and you lose some in the middle of the transmission as well. Yeah, that was a learn by doing. I also used to use the SQL and found that happening. What we tend to do now, it's sort of just good practice, is if you're doing free text transmissions in the chat box, to add a couple of blank lines to the top of your transmission, and that will visibly separate it out from the noise, and it's easier for the recipient to see what's going on under those circumstances.
How would I customize a form? So these are active HTML page. Well, no, it's actually, I'm sorry, I cross-wiring with WinLink. You actually have to go back to the developers. There's a whole form team that's developing forms, and you have to get them to add a new form. They can teach you how to do it. That's one of the experiences I've decided not to have. But yes, it can be customized, and if you look carefully, well, I'm not going to go there. Having your own custom forms is a thing that's supported. The creating of them is a technology I have not pursued, but it can be done.
Not unlike WinLink, you can do custom forms in WinLink as well, but you do end up with the issue of making sure everybody that you're going to be sending these to has a copy of the custom form installed. Otherwise, it just won't work.
So the answer is, if you're aggressive, you can do it yourself. You have to enjoy software and getting your hands dirty. It is not well documented, as far as I can find, on how to do those forms. So.
Let's assume I bolt through all that and I do in fact make a custom form.
Yeah.
How do I get it in the hands of the other people in my net?
Well, you email it to them out of band. I guess you could send it through FLAMP, and then have them install it. You know, that's just a file. You could send it through that as well. You're introducing opportunities for failure. So I always find I don't do anything during an incident or even a test that I haven't done already multiple times when I'm not under pressure. So the short answer is make the form, email it to everybody, and have them install it. That's the easiest one. All right, let's see, going to the next. Intrigued enough through a tactical net. Where are you located, WY7AA? You're West Virginia? You're on the edge. Let me take a note. There's a New Jersey net that is probably the right one for you to get a true on. WY7.
He's from Wyoming.
Wyoming.
Wyoming, Don.
Oh, I thought that was West Virginia. All right, Wyoming. Ooh, I don't know. That's a reach. Your 80 meters isn't going to get to you. I'm going to make a note, and I haven't looked at the other nets that are out there, but there's some websites. I can go look at some websites and see. And I'll get back to you.
I think I saw someone on here from Washington State or Oregon. He might be closer to them.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen the HTML interface for messages as published by the National Library of Medicine. Tell me what that does and how you would use that.
It serves as an interface between you and your client's staff so that they put their text in an HTML form. And
Yeah,
if they try and use the squiggly edges that they normally use on their email or anything like that, it says, sorry,
Got it.
images aren't allowed. And then it sets what they put in there that is allowed back to you so that you can just stick it in whatever format you need to send it. And
Yep.
it also tells them if they try and put an image on there, you have to contact the control operator and
Yeah.
tells them where to find us so that we can say, well, what's it for? Nope, sorry, not a high enough priority, or yes, we'll get it right through, you know, that sort of thing. And it's public use because it was done with federal funds, tax money. Trouble is they didn't give them money for continued maintenance. So now it would probably need some work after 3 years.
Sure.
But still, when we were using it, it was handy, and we used it for 3 different messaging systems, one of which is gone by the board, and then the other 2 are NBEMS and WinLink. But worked real well because we had most of the staff of the National Institutes of Health with stored messages to send through our system.
Okay.
At an appointed time. And so they all tried to clobber us, and we wanted them to overwhelm the system.
Yep.
And it didn't. You know, the stuff they were trying to clobber us with, that piece of software filtered out nicely, and we could just cut and paste in a WinLink or NBEMS or whatever else we were using, and it all flew just fine.
Very good. Yeah, what I will say is for our tactical communications, we have really focused on the default FL message interface. It's got a whole series of forms here that you can pre-use. How do I phrase this? I'm lazy, so I use what I make do with what I've got without doing a lot of extra work. But it sounded like a really cool tool, so I'll go look up that and see what that does. No, and here's some other nets. Excellent. I'm not aware of a listing of all the NBEMS nets. I do have listings for WinLink stuff, but I'm not aware of all the NBEMS nets. I should have done an effort on that. Okay, get suggestions.
I may have something. I'm going to go take a peek in my binder here. Hang on.
Yeah, well, a lot of New England does. My favorite two are the Pennsylvania and the New Hampshire. That's what I do every morning. But yeah, there in New England, we have a fair number of these nets. But my favorite are New Hampshire and Pennsylvania. Come on.
Don't wait on me. I'll see what I have here.
Yeah, no, I'm having trouble scrolling down in the window right now. Let me kill some stuff. Kill that.
No, what I had was is actually for the NTS traffic nets, not for NBEM nets.
Yeah.
And the list that I found was from Barry K3 EUI in Pennsylvania, and it's I think the farthest west you got was Minnesota. So,
I noticed that Dan has his hand up, WL7COO. Anytime you guys want to bring him on.
Sure, go ahead. What's your question?
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. I find that
Sure.
the most endearing feature of NBEMS is push comes to shove and you're out there and all you have is a laptop and a radio. That's all you need. If the radio has a mic and a speaker,
Yep.
It's a little bit crude, but it works. And that is, you know, how do I say it? I'm always going to have respect for NBEMS and how it can be used in exigent circumstances.
Right.
Yeah, I've actually done that on at least one occasion. We were having a practice net in my at the time I was using a signal link and it got all fouled up. And I finally just went to the mic and speaker route and it worked just fine. You know, you just kind of know what you're doing and put the mic in the right place at the right time and hit the transmit and or the receive and it yeah, it works. So you can use it under some difficult circumstances at times.
Larry, KI6 BKP, go ahead.
Yeah. Just to prove a point, I actually used an old couple of FRS radios. Me and a friend of mine to demonstrate to actually hospital administrators
Mhm.
using this system. So it's, I mean, you could probably use a telephone if you need to.
Yes,
So,
I
I mean,
could
it's
believe that
very,
would work.
it's very, very, very flexible, unlike WinLink.
All right, those are the questions. I got a few last things to state. Are there any other questions before I make my final closing comments? Yeah, I was going to show one slide, and then I'll drop the screen share.
Okay, I think NBEMS, the question is NBEMS over JS8 called Lavaric, probably because it's usable on multiple radios and multiple computers, and some of these other ones are limited.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm also I'm not terribly familiar with the other ones. I've used them on occasion, but I'm not sure that they're forms based or not, or is it more conversational in those other ones?
So a couple of
I think
things to leave you with
JS8
before.
call is conversational.
Yeah, most of those are. The issue is the key issue I keep finding is doing this in such a way that we can handle a wide variety of complexity with a relatively simple system. And NBEMS does that. It's important to recognize it's not the same as a voice net. My approach to the typing problem is that I have written out the script for the net before the net's called in a text file. And I cut and paste the message into the screen before when I need each message. So I write up the script for the net. I cut and paste and then hit the transmit button and it sends it out. And I avoid all the delay in typing. Alan Richards, WA1AR, takes that a step further and he programs all his macro keys for the net. And literally he just hits a key for each of the steps in the net. Running an NBEMS net is not like running a voice net. You need to practice it. Otherwise, it can become unwieldy for you to run. So practice is required for running the net. The other big problem that crops up is doubling. Last Sunday's Philadelphia or Pennsylvania net, literally everyone the first time around in region 1 doubled on everyone else. They had to start over. That's why I put the little lead tone, and you need practice in not stomping on each other. So the last message I'm going to leave you with before we go back out of sharing is you got to do this over and over and over again if you're going to get it to work really smoothly. And that's why we have our MEMA NBEMS nets once a month, just to make sure we're all in practice. And now I will stop sharing.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add to that is you need to test your setup frequently because things change. Sometimes accidentally, a change is made to one of the codecs on your computer, and your settings get fouled up. And you need to get good at recognizing what's going wrong when things go wrong, as they often will with any system. And the other comment I'll make about JS8 call and VAR AC is, you know, the more tools in your tool case, tool chest, the better off you are. You know, there may be a time where NBEMS is just not working for you. You know, somebody on the other end, their setup is all messed up, or something is going wrong. And you know, the more tools you have, the better off you're going to be. So.
And I'll just add to the check your setups. I've had a particularly annoying problem with Windows that it likes to do Windows updates regularly. Since my sound cards are USB sound cards, they can sometimes drift. And so actually after every Windows update, I have to go through and recheck to make sure everything's working. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
Did you see the one I sent you in chat?
Which I'm not sure. What's that?
The controlling of the net by voice and sending traffic on the same channel. I suppose you could do that. I haven't seen it done in any regular way, but you could use the frequency from voice, so long as you're not trying to send digital at the same moment. And you know, the problem is on your rig, you're going to need to set it into a digital mode. So if you're flopping back and forth, you got to kind of keep that straight too.
Stu, the Matthew KD8 TTE runs mixed mode nets every weekend on 60 meters out of Ohio. So it is very possible.
Yeah, it can be done, particularly if your rig has two receivers, two VFOs on it. You can listen on one, you know, as voice and use the other for digital.
Now, actually, the way we've done that locally is we use voice over the 2-meter repeaters and we send the NBEMS through HF is what we've often done, particularly early on the nets when we're having trouble getting everything to work right.
Are there any mailbox modes on NBEMS?
No, NBEMS doesn't truly have an inbox mode. No, that's not quite true. Because there's a trick which Dave Doe and I do, and I think a number of other people do for digital nets. And that is, once you have been acknowledged, the computer is going to do most of the rest of the work. So for both the New Hampshire and the Pennsylvania nets, I check in make sure everything's working, and then I leave NBEMS running along with FLAMP and fldigi. And all of the messages and all of the files that are sent during the net are captured and saved on my system. So as long as NBEMS running, you don't have to be there to get the message. You can go pick them up at your leisure. And I do that for New Hampshire and the Pennsylvania nets all the time. It's not quite a post box. It does mean you don't have to be there. You have to set it up to capture the messages. Well, then the last thing I'll leave you with is get 3 or 4 people and try this. I've given you my experience that we get extremely good reliability over a fairly large area, and we're able to effectively transmit and complex forms. But that's my opinion. Go get together a small group of people. We got together, I think, 4 people and started practicing NBEMS nets. We actually practiced them through the 2-meter repeater. And on that, we did use the voice in between to queue us up. And we did that till we got comfortable with using the NBEMS software to send the messages, send the forms, and receive. And then once you're comfortable with doing it in that simple environment, go expand and get more people and go test how far you can go reliably. NBEMS tells you the signal to noise ratio. You can tell what signals are falling off the edge, and you can start building a map of where NBEMS is going to be reliable for your locality. In any event, that'll be my last advertisement is go try it, because the only way you ever really know how it works is to give it a try.
What, you don't want a donation for your campaign?
For my campaign?
Never mind.
Can you forward some of the messages that you're receiving in NBEMS to an email program to be sent out?
Yeah, you can take the NBEMS, show it in HTML format, print it out as a PDF and email it on. And that's done fairly regularly.
Okay, we saw some other stuff going on in chats with like some links to some other good stuff. I don't see any hands up. Are there any more questions? Any more smart aleck questions like my last one? Any answers?
It does work. It does work. It does take practice, though. Like you said, get with some people locally and try it, and try the different settings, because it might work differently in some areas than the other. But there are some great guides out there on what to set all of your settings to exactly to use it, and try it. And I think you'll like it.
And you'll want to learn the different modes that work better in perhaps your area and faster speeds and that sort of thing.
The more we have in our toolbox, the more skills we have, the more variables we have, the better we can be.
Absolutely.
Diana, got your hand up.
I do. I wanted to say that I used OrcaNet for about 1.5 years until I got used to fldigi, and I was able to share my great experiences with that, so that our Aries team could see the possibilities that fldigi offered that were unique as well. So just like you said, give it a try. And it's really fun doing the nets. Great group of people. And so I hope people start using fldigi. I use WinLink too, but we need every tool we can get sometimes.
Yes, ma'am. Anybody else got anything to say?
Thank you very much, Don and Stu. I appreciate you responding to my invitation.
My pleasure.
All right, guys. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you both. This was great.
Thank you. Glad you liked it.
With that, I want to say 73s to everybody, and see you next week.
See you next week.
Good night, Dan.
Good night, all.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.